generally don't like to overlap my pieces of paper. I prefer to abut them. If you end up with a small amount extra at the end here, you can always just trim it off. As you can see here, I've got a little bit extra that's overlapping. Sometimes I do find that the cardstock isn't quite 12 by 12 inches or 30.5 by 30.5 centimeters. So if you have a little bit of excess, just cut it off. There we go, we've now created the base of our left-hand side. Now we'll create the base for the right-hand side. Whenever I'm working, I always like to position my cardstocks along one of the lines so you can see that it's perfectly straight. I just find it's easier to work that way. Just remember when you're sticking this piece down that you stick it the right way. Due to the fact that we only inked the 3 edges, we need to make sure that the edge that we haven't inked is the one that lies up against the edge here. Same here, if you've got a little bit overlapping, just cut it off. Just noticed here that it needs a little bit more inking, so I'm just going to go over it. Generally you won't end up seeing too much because we are putting a border along the top, but just to make sure I have just inked a little bit more again just in case. At this stage, when you're putting together your layout, you can either refer back to the notes, or if you have taken a photograph, you can refer back to your photograph, depending on which way you feel it's easier to put your layout together. Just remember when you're going to stick these pieces down that you want to make sure that the pattern joins up together again. As I explained earlier, it doesn't look particularly nice if you don't line up the patterns again. I don't particularly like the look if the patterns don't line up. At this stage, you actually need to add your ticket behind it, your little tag. So what I would do, I actually think it's easier if you've got your picture out and you work from the notes. Had I stuck that down, it would have been a little bit of a problem. So there we go, it makes it easier. Just rather stick your tag down first and then you'll pull off the backing tape and then you'll stick down this big piece in one go. If you by any chance had stuck it down and you hadn't put your tag behind it, it's not the end of the world. You could actually just cut your tag smaller and then just abut it at the top here. Give you a little bit of a different look, so it wouldn't be tucked underneath, but you don't have to worry, you could do it like that. If you do want to add twine to it, it would be better to do it at this stage or even before. I've decided to not actually add twine because of this paper. I think it's going to be a bit bulky underneath it, and it's not, the grammage is quite thick, but I still think it would be better to maybe put an enamel dot or something or a button. So I'm not going to add twine onto it. But if you would like to, if you've got quite heavy duty paper or you're using cardstock for your tag, you can always add a little bit of twine, which gives you a really nice look. I always find when you're sticking to just keep lining up your page along the lines on the cutting mat, just so you can make sure that everything is always straight. Also, because you want your paper to line up across your page, so what you need to do is line up your patterns along the bottom, and then it makes it easier for your left and your right hand piece of paper to always line up. To me personally, I don't think it looks really nice if it doesn't line up. I do like my things to be quite perfect that way. For this to get it 100%, it's probably actually better to measure it. So it's 3 centimeters. Then what I would do is measure 3 centimeters down on your tag. And then you know when you're sticking your paper that's your 3 centimeter line mark. Just so both of your tags stick out the same amount. There we go. And you'll then see that your pattern joins up perfectly across the center again. Whenever sticking down your strips, just double check that the edge that you haven't inked is the one that lies down the center. So now we have created everything that we should have stuck down according to this diagram here. Let's turn over the page, and now we need to add our center bit. So at any stage, if you would like to, if you're not totally sure, you can always refer back to your photograph that you took earlier, just to make it a little bit easier. To stick it here because I think it looks really nice just having those little scallops coming out behind it. If you would like to make a little pencil mark on your page, you can. Alternatively, if you just look on your cutting mat, you could use that measurement when you're sticking it down, just to make sure you stick it exactly where you would like to. I really like the blue going across here as it hasn't got too much detail. I really think it sets off my photos nicely. If I had used that one, for example, I do feel like it would have actually distracted from my photos a little bit. So if you look at the difference of having that behind your pictures to having that behind your photos, I think that blue will set off my photos a lot nicer. So I always find as you're doing your layout, just check beforehand that you are happy with the patterns that will go behind your photos so they don't detract from your pictures, because after all, our photos actually what we would like to showcase. They are the most important things at the end of the day. Although I love patterned papers and embellishments, I think they are stunning, but ultimately we want to show off our photos. When you are sticking down patterned papers, always just bear in mind your page might be a little bit different to mine, but for example, you wouldn't want to cover over these flowers. It does seem like a little bit of a pity to cover over them, so I'm just going to move my wood grain over a little bit so we leave these flowers exposed. You can then choose what sort of gap you would like between your patterned papers. I've decided to go for a very narrow gap, but if you would like to, you can always do a little bit of a wider gap. It's really starting to come together really nicely now. With this piece as well, just bear in mind if you don't want to cover over the flowers, if you're using a patterned paper with flowers, for example, or a pretty pattern, and you choose to not cover it over, it doesn't matter at all. You can just move this little piece over a little bit. It still would look really nice. If you want to just double check that it would work with your photos still, just maybe position 2 photos down and then check that you're still happy with the look before you stick it down. You'll see on this layout not as much of that patterned paper is visible. I just chose to not put it over the edge there because I think I'd like to have a word going down there, so I've just altered my page a little bit, as I didn't want to put a word over there because I think it looks a little bit too busy. So I've decided to put more of that underneath my photograph. Obviously you're never going to match up this pattern 100% unless you cut it out of exactly the same piece of two different cardstocks. That's the only way, if you work top to bottom out of two sheets that are identical, that you can actually get that to match up. So mine aren't 100%, but I try to match them as closely as possible. Here you can see I've got bigger circles. There the circles are a little bit smaller. So as far as possible, I try to match mine kind of as perfectly as I can. Personally, I always do like my pages to be as perfect as possible, but at the end of the day, it is still a handcraft and it doesn't have to be 100%. I really like these colors. I think they look nice and relaxing and very tranquil, and they work really nicely with beach photographs. As I have mentioned before, if you don't want to use patterned papers for your borders, washi tape also would work really nicely. Now we've stuck down all of our patterned pieces of paper. Generally, the next step I like to do is sanding my photos and matting them, and I do all my final embellishments last. You find any little elements you might like to use. I did notice earlier there's some very nice different elements here that can be cut off. You always find different journaling cards that you can use. There's even a whole sheet like that with all sorts of different elements that you can fussy cut out, depending on how much you like fussy cutting. I know a lot of ladies prefer to just use bought embellishments, but I do find it's quite nice to actually fussy cut some of these flowers because they do go perfectly with the paper ranges. There's all sorts of different elements. I do find sheets like this are very useful because they're just a nice way to add different elements to your pages, and they always match perfectly color-wise, which I do really enjoy. But I find it's better to rather leave all your final embellishments to the end. At this stage, we're going to sand the photos and mat them. Stick down the photos if you're sure that's where they want to be and you don't want to stick anything out from underneath them. Sometimes it's quite nice if you fussy cut little flowers, leaves for example, to actually have them sticking out from underneath the photos. So sometimes it's better to sand your photos, mat them, but before you stick them down, cut out your elements and decide where you would like to put them on your layout, because it's obviously easier if they haven't been stuck down if you want to tuck anything underneath them at all. I always like to sand the edges of my photo. It just creates a nice white look, and I find it just adds a little bit of extra interest to your photo before you mat it. Some ladies just sand the edges of their photos and they don't actually mat them in cardstock, but personally I do like my photos to be matted. Sometimes I put one mat, and other times I actually do double matting, sometimes even triple matting, just depending on how much I'd like to set the photos off. Generally, I use a sanding block to sand my photos. I find this works best. And you can see you've now created a white edge onto it. So just to show you the difference, the photo on the left hasn't been sanded and the photo on the right has been sanded. Okay, now I've finished sanding the edges of all of my photos. It's also just a useful tip to keep a Tupperware or something on your lap so you don't end up with all the sanded pieces all over you. At this stage now that I have sanded all my photos, we need to decide what color cardstock we would like to back them with. Usually I take out a variety of different colors depending on my layout that I'm working on, and then just see what looks nice behind them. Then it's up to you if you'd like to single mat them or double mat them or even triple mat them if you would like to. I've just taken out the two different blues to try and a grey to see what I feel works best with my layout. I'm just going to get a turquoise to see what that looks like. My first thought was I do quite like the dark blue, but I just want to try a turquoise and see how that looks with my photos. I think I might even actually try a white. I just find that all of these colors are a little bit too prominent compared to the fact that my papers are quite muted and so are the photos. I'm not sure about using a brighter color cardstock with it. If you want to look at both colors next to each other, what you can always do is set it up on the left hand side with one color cardstock and on the right hand side another color cardstock. Step back and then you can see what you feel looks better up against your photos. I personally like the white and the grey, so I think I'm going to rather go for the white and the grey up against my photos. Depending on how much matting you would like to do, you can even triple mat it. I think firstly I'll double mat it and then I will see, but I do quite like it with the white border against it afterwards again. So it'll be white, grey, and then white I think sets off the photos really nicely. For my photographs, I generally always prefer to use the 12mm double-sided tape. I don't really like to use the narrow one on photos. The only time I might use it is if it's a very small photograph. Otherwise, I prefer to use the 12mm. I generally prefer to do quite narrow matting. I'm not really a fan of wide matting, but that is also just a personal preference. The one nice thing about scrapbooking is there's no right and no wrong way to do it. So you can scrapbook your page according to how you like it, because after all it is your page at the end of the day. Okay, I've now single matted all of my photos. At this stage you can put them onto your layout and you can decide if you're happy with the single matting or if you prefer to double or even triple mat them. Personally, I do feel with my photos that they do show up a lot better on my layout if they are double matted. So I am going to add the grey to them, and at that stage then I'm going to see if I would like to add white again or if I'm happy with the double matting of just the white and the grey. But I definitely feel that the grey lifts it. Looks a little bit plain just with the white. I do feel like it blends into the pattern papers a little bit too much, and I definitely do like the look if I add the grey behind it. Yet again, I've kept my second mat quite narrow, but even with a narrow mat you can still see it gives you quite a nice contrast between the photos and the patterned papers. If you look at my photo on the left, that's double matted, versus my photo on the right that is only matted once in the white. It doesn't show up nearly as well. So although double matting and even triple matting takes a lot of extra time, I do feel that it is actually worth it in the end. At this stage now, I'm going to decide if I would like to just double mat it, and that's how it looks double matted, or if I'd like to triple mat it. On this page I actually quite like it just double matted. I do feel I prefer the darker grey up against the blue versus doing a white matte again. So for this layout I'm going to keep it as just the double matting. I do really like the dark grey twine on my layout. You can either do a single layer of the twine, you can do a double layer of the twine, or like I did on my layout that I'm copying, I actually did 2 different strips of the, well actually I used string, and then I did knots in between. So it's actually very versatile to all the different things you can do. For this one I'm actually going to try and see what it looks like if I do the 2 different strips of twine and then do knots in it. I just want to see for a different effect how that will look with the twine versus doing the same with the string. This is nice because it's got the white and the grey, so it just adds a little bit of extra interest onto your page so you don't have just a plain single colour. Whenever I'm using twine, I do just like to tuck it around the back of my layout. So always just keep a little bit of an extra, like a tail on it that you'll then tuck underneath your page. Just finishes it off neater than cutting it, because sometimes it does fray. Generally then I just eye it where I do my knots. It is quite difficult to get it 100% perfect, although in life I actually do like things to be perfect. Sometimes with this it is a little bit tricky, so I actually generally just eye it rather. But there, that's created a nice look onto the page, and then I always just leave it a little bit longer, as I said before, so you can tuck some around the back. It's up to you where you'd like to put your twine on your page. On my first page I put the twine along the bottom there, but it's totally up to you with your layout, how you would like to do it. You can even add twine underneath your photos like that. Also actually gives you a really nice look, or alternatively you could even run it along that strip. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to cut out all my different embellishments I would like to use. So I'm not going to stick anything down yet. I'm going to cut out my different elements. I'm going to just leave my twine like that until I've decided what else I want to attach onto my page. When I'm 100% happy with what I want to add onto my page, at that stage I will start gluing. But I prefer to not glue anything until I'm 100% sure about exactly how I would like my layout. I'm now just doing my second piece of twine for my right hand side of my layout. So on your page you can use string or you can use twine. On the first layout I added the string, but on this page I just like the color of the grey, so I thought I'd prefer to rather add twine onto this page. And I just feel with the white in between it looks really nice with these different papers. And then on my first page you will see that I added string along the top, but I don't feel like it's actually going to work on this page. I feel like it's starting to get a little bit too busy with the different patterns, and then you put something over it. So I'm actually going to leave that strip plain and then just add maybe a few other embellishments, or I might use my Nouveau Pearl drops at the top there, but I'll decide later. But for now I'm not going to add any other twine because I don't really think my layout needs it. I'm now going to use this embellishment sheet. I've chosen to fussy cut a few of these little flowers. I might even fussy cut a few of the little seagulls. I'll just see what I think looks nice on my page. What I usually do is I cut out a variety, position it, and then I see which ones I would like to use. But I find it's much easier once you've cut them out already to decide what works well on your layout. Whenever you cut out elements like this, it's called fussy cutting. Generally it is better to use a small pair of scissors just so you can get easily into all the little corners. You can also ink the edges if you would like to, like I did on the pattern papers earlier, but sometimes it's a little bit intricate to try and get into the small details in the corners, and I actually don't feel like it looks particularly nice when very small elements are inked. So generally I actually leave my fussy cutting items uninked, but that is totally up to you if you would like to ink them or you'd like to stick them onto your page without being inked on the edges. If you don't want to fussy cut, there are also some amazing pre-made flowers that you can actually buy. You don't have to feel like you've got a fussy cut items. The variety of pre-made flowers is gorgeous. We always really get some very, very nice flowers. So it's up to you if you'd like to purchase a packet of pre-cut flowers or if you would like to sit and fussy cut them yourself. Always works quite well on your page. Do a little grouping of your cutout elements. You can play around with them once you've cut out more, but just to give you an idea. Some of the companies actually make really nice embellishments that are already pre-cut. For example, Kaisercraft does some really nice elements that actually match each different paper range, and those are already cut out for you, which saves you a lot of time, and they're actually really gorgeous because they match your paper ranges that you're working with. So you will find quite a few of the different product houses do actually come out with the pre-cut elements, which also does save you time. If you're a little bit pushed for time, it's much easier to buy a packet of pre-cut embellishments just to stick on your layout. with these different paper packs, it's actually really nice. You can usually create 2, if not even 3 double page layouts out of all the papers that you get in the pack. And out of these element sheets, you can cut out so many different elements for your layout, which can all coordinate. So they are also very good value for money because you get a lot out of each pack. And as I said before, having it coordinating also saves you time and effort while creating your layout, because you know that all the papers go really nicely together with each other. And then it's really up to you how embellished you would like your page. Some ladies like to add a lot of embellishments onto their pages. Other ladies like to add less onto their pages. It's totally up to you as to what style you would like to go for. And on the templates where I've put my different elements, it's totally up to you if you'd like to put embellishments in the same places, or if you'd like to add some more or even take some of them off. It's your page at the end of the day, so it's totally up to you what embellishments you would like to add onto your layout, depending on what layout you're doing, what elements go nicely with it. It's totally up to you what you would like to add. I do know that a lot of ladies don't like to journal on their pages at all. I'm one of them. I do find it really difficult actually to journal a story onto my layout. Often I do find that it doesn't really work on my page, but I do find it is very important to at least put the date on your page, even use a tag. It's quite nice to say where it was. And if you would like to write quite a lot about that day, you can always actually write it onto the back of your layout. So it's not on show, but it is there if anybody, even current generations or future generations, would like to read what you've written. You can always just make a note in your album to say that you've put further details on the back of the layout. Because at the end of the day, you do want people to know when it was, where it was. I do think it is important that you add those details onto it. And I do notice some ladies doing some beautiful journaling, and I take my hat off to them, because journaling on your page is not that easy, but I do think it is a very nice element to add onto your page if you would like to. You can also type it if you don't like your handwriting, but I do also feel it is quite nice for people to see your own handwriting. Write directly onto your layout. The only problem is if it doesn't come out 100%, your layout could be a little bit ruined and you might have to cover it over with something else. So to be ideal, I prefer to actually rather do my journaling onto a tag or onto a separate piece of paper before sticking it onto my page. I have recently journaled straight onto my page, and luckily it came out perfectly, but you do worry when you're journaling directly onto your page. If you do make a mistake, it is sometimes a little bit tricky to cover over it. So generally with all my journaling, I prefer to do on a tag or something separate that once it's perfect, I only stick it onto my page at that stage. So I really think these little leaves look very pretty. I like the look of these little flowers and little leaves. I think they're going to finish off my layout nicely. Then just play around with your different elements that you've cut out and arrange them how you like them best. Sometimes you wouldn't actually believe it can take such a long time to arrange some flowers and some leaves. Often I play around with them for hours on end until I'm happy with my desired look at the end. If you would like to raise any of your elements, you can always use foam tape. That gives you a nice raised look on your page. I actually just like my flowers top and bottom on those two photos. I don't actually think I'm going to add anything else. I think it starts becoming a bit too busy and starts just taking away from my photos. Fussy cutting very small little elements, for example the little birds here, I haven't actually cut in between each of the legs because I do find then it becomes a little bit too fragile and sometimes they can break off or bend a little bit, so I prefer to just leave a little bit of the white in between. Sometimes you'll find the same for very, very thin leaves as well. It's better actually to cut a little bit more white around them just so they're not so thin and fragile. So I think for now that's enough fussy cutting elements. I like the ones that I've cut out and I think they work really well on my page. So now I'm just going to cut out a few of the little arrows. I also quite like some of these words. The tickets can also actually be really nice. I like tickets for doing a little journaling or for writing the date on, for example. These little tabs also look really nice if you put them above your photos. So I'm going to cut out a variety of these elements and see where they work best on my layout. I always like flags on my pages. You can either cut out flags like this, which are a lot easier because they've been made for you, or you can actually cut out your own flags out of patterned paper. Even washi tape flags look really nice. So I'll just cut out a few and then we can decide where they look best on the layout. With fussy cut elements like this, I will definitely ink around the edges of them. The ones that I won't ink around the edges are the flowers that I explained earlier, that it doesn't always give you a particularly nice look as you can't get into the small little gaps in between the flowers and the leaves, so I prefer to not ink them at all. But for something like Enjoy the Sunshine, you'll find if you ink it, it gives you a nice contrast. And I do find that it looks better on the page then. If you would like to, you can also mat these in cardstock, which also would look really nice. I'll decide later once I've cut them out if I would like to mat them, just to give you an idea how it looks when it's been inked. To cut around here, it's easier to cut with your scissors, but any of the pieces I can cut straight. I do prefer to use my craft knife because it gives you a neater look, but to go around the edges and things here, you obviously need to cut them with your scissors. And I do find for any of your cutting, a small pair of scissors like these do work the best. With little tabs like this, if you've got enough, you can put above each photo, or you could do each alternate ones if you wanted to. I do have 4, so I can actually put them above each of my photos. So you can have little tabs like that coming out, which gives you a nice effect. Just choose whichever words you find are appropriate to go with your layout and your photographs. You could even swap it out and do chilling on the beach instead, and maybe sunshine could go somewhere else. These also actually look quite nice on the side, so you could otherwise do something like that. Could look nice. Maybe if you enjoy sunshine down there. I'm just going to see if there's any other elements on this page that I would like to cut out for now. For the circles, it is always handy to have a circle punch. You do find it is easier. It's quite hard to cut out circles really neatly with scissors. So if you do have a circle punch, which is the right size to cut out circles, obviously it does make it a lot easier. So I think I'm just going to cut out the ticket, because I'm not going to do too much journaling on this layout, but I would like to put the date, and I think it is nice just to say where it was. There's my ticket. You can either cut it and have it going across both pages like that, or you could just do one strip. I do feel if I do it like that, I would actually like to put something else in that space, because I feel like that space then looks a little bit empty. So maybe 2 little flags or something would look nice. There, I think it actually works quite nicely. If I've got my tickets there, I've got my 2 little flags there. Could also actually put the tickets at the top. But I feel like they actually work quite well in that space underneath my pictures, so I'm going to rather keep them there. And then maybe just I feel that space a little bit empty, so I think I might just cut out 2 little elements just to put in there. The camera, and then try a little heart and see how that fills up the space. Okay, do a little grouping with the little camera, and then that says great day with a heart, which I think finishes off that space really nicely. So I don't feel like we need to add any other elements onto my page. I think we have quite a few different elements, and I think you can still see the photos really nicely. And always it seems a bit of a pity to cover up too much of the patterned paper. So I think like this is eye-catching, but we haven't overdone it with the embellishments. So now I'm just going to ink all the other little elements that I've cut out. And then once they're inked, you can see if you feel like it would still look nice to mat them, or if you feel like the inking is enough. You can see the difference that the inking does create. If you look at that item that isn't inked and that one that is inked, you can see quite a nice difference between them. So often you do find with little elements you don't actually have to mat them, because it shows you enough of a contrast just by inking. For any journaling or any other forms of writing that I am going to do on the tickets, I would prefer to do that before I stick it onto my layout, just in case I do make a mistake. Then I can, obviously I don't have another ticket I could use, but I could just try something else then in that space. At least then I haven't got an item stuck onto my page with either, that doesn't look as nice as I would like it to look. once again, when you have decided where you would like to put all your little elements, just photograph your page, so then when you're sticking it down, you know exactly how you had arranged it before. Because I often think you're going to remember exactly where you put each element, and then you don't, and it's a bit tricky to sometimes put your page back together again. So I always find it's just a useful tip to always just rather photograph your page as you go along. And on my tags, unfortunately, that grey button would have been perfect, and it's already actually got a little bit of thread through it in orange. It matches really nicely with the flowers, but unfortunately I've only got one of those left, so I think at the top I might add some enamel dots onto my page. The enamel dots are lovely. I do feel like they always look really, really nice on your pages. So I think if I use these pale turquoise ones, they look really nice. Could also try the darker ones, but I feel because everything else is in quite muted tones, I'm going to rather use the pale turquoise. And then if you use this size, they cover over the white hole nicely. That finishes off nicely, and it also just adds a little bit of dimension onto your page. I've chosen to use the same color on both, but you don't have to. You can see it comes in a lot of very nice colors. You could use two different ones if you wanted to, but I generally do like my items look quite symmetrical, so I am going to use the same on either side. If I'd like to still use that one little button on my page, I could always incorporate it down there at the bottom with the camera. Maybe if we just put the one that's a little bit different in the middle. Yeah, I think that little grouping looks really nice. I don't think that I'm going to worry to matte all these different little embellishments. I think you get quite a nice contrast just by having them inked on the edges, so I'm not going to worry to matte any of those separately. So I'm just going to take a photograph now of where I've got all my different embellishments, just so it reminds me when I'm putting it together how I would like to position my page. So usually I take a picture of the full page, but then it is quite useful to take some close-ups just of where the little elements are, just so it makes it easier for you. Especially with groupings of flowers and things, sometimes it can be a little bit hard to replicate what you organized earlier, so it's quite useful just to have a picture just to remind you of how it looked. With these little elements, it's up to you if you would like to put a little bit of double-sided tape behind them. It does mean then that you're cutting your double-sided tape into very small pieces. So usually for all of my elements, I really like the Tombow glue. That's my go-to glue for everything. It works really, really well. Just once you put onto the back of your element, I wait between 3 to 5 minutes so the glue just starts drying a little bit. You otherwise find when you've got very fine details, sometimes if it's a bit wet, it can ooze out underneath it, which you obviously don't want, because even though it does dry clear on your layout, it can sometimes always be a little bit tacky. So I prefer to just put it on the back, wait 3 to 5 minutes. You can see when it's starting to go a little bit tackier, and at that stage then you can stick it onto your layout. So just need to put our double-sided tape on the back of the photos. And then just remember with these little groupings, if you want them to tuck underneath your photos, you need to just stick those little groupings first before you stick your photos down. Sometimes what works well with those is to actually attach them to the back of your photo before you stick your photo down. Same with these little tags, you just need to decide if you want them just abutted to the photo or if you would prefer them to stick out from underneath. Doing it like that, it actually fits really nicely just on the top, like that. So this photo we can stick down because we're not going to have any little flowers coming out from underneath it. So this photo I can now stick down. And for this one, I do think for little grouping, it is going to be easier to actually attach it onto my photo first, and then we can put a little bit of glue on the back of it afterwards. Going to use double-sided tape here now to hold it, but once it's all stuck down, I am going to put glue on the back of these flowers as well, just so it's totally secure on my page. Put glue onto the back here. And then just put it aside to dry, because you don't want to put your sleeve or anything into the glue, so I find I just put it to one side while it's drying. All these little elements now, we can put our glue on the back of them. There are a variety of different liquid glues, but I have tried quite a lot, and personally now I will only ever use the multi-mono liquid glue by Tombow. Definitely my favorite. So now we're gluing all these little elements. It definitely makes it easier that I have taken a photograph. So when I put it all together just now, I will remember where each piece went. photo here, I think it might be better to add a few of these, attach them to the picture underneath. Alternatively, you don't have to put your double-sided tape right to the edge. You can actually leave a little bit so you can tuck it underneath. So depending on how much you would like to tuck underneath, you can do it that way around too. But I do generally find it's easier to add your elements onto the back of the photograph before sticking it down. Little leaf that I would like to add onto my photograph. So now it's glued, I can just attach the last little one underneath and then put a little bit of extra glue on it. And then just put it to one side so it can start drying. All of these would be safer just to rather move over a little bit to the other side or just wait until you're ready to stick them down. Our first photo is nearly dry, so I can stick it and then I'll start sticking these elements down. It makes it a lot easier when you stick it that all our little flowers are already attached to our photo. At this stage you might find it easier to get your photograph so you can see exactly where you had stuck all your different elements the first time. Generally just eye the center, but if you would like to, you can measure it so it's 100%, but generally I just eye it into the center. sometimes advisable just to see how much space your second word will take up, so you know with your positioning, and just check that it will actually fit. The one nice thing when you're gluing something is you can actually just make sure that it's 100% straight. You can move it a little bit. If the first time you stuck it down it's not 100% straight, you can actually move it a little bit, especially if you haven't put glue to the very edge of your elements. Now, because I'm sticking my photo on the right hand side, rather line this up along the bottom again, just so you make sure that your photos are totally in line with each other. Same with this photo, because we've already added all our little flowers onto it. It just makes it a lot easier to stick down. Find these little tabs actually finish off your photos really nicely. As I said before, it generally works better to have odd numbers of embellishments. So I do find the 3 work really well there. So as you can see, our layout is starting to come together really nicely. We pretty much nearly actually in the home straight with it now. Just a little bit of finishing details, a little bit of journaling, and then our page is finished. This button was actually really nice. It was a sassafras button from actually many years ago, and it already had the cotton through it, which is really nice. But if you have buttons that don't have the cotton through, it's actually really easy just to thread some through. It just gives you a little bit of color onto your page and just finishes off your button. I just need to wait for the glue to dry a little bit behind all of these elements. At this stage now you can do your journaling if you would like to, just while we wait for the last of the glue to dry. I just need to look up the date of it and then just decide if there's any other detail that I would like to add onto it. Before doing any journaling, I actually just like to practice on a sheet of rough paper first, just to make sure that you've got your spacing right and it'll actually fit on the space that you would like to do your journaling on. Because if you start writing and you figure out you don't have quite enough space, it's a little bit of a problem. So it is best to just plan it on a rough piece of paper first, and then you can do your proper writing directly onto the tickets. Okay, now the glue is dry enough on all the different little elements here that are fussy cut, I can now stick them down. Let's get our picture so we can see exactly how they were positioned before. For your twine, I always find it's best to stick it with the Tombow glue as well. Just do a thin line across. If you would like to make sure that it is totally straight, you can actually position your ruler and then you just do one line of your glue just above it. There's one way just to make sure that it is totally straight. With this too, it's very important that you do wait a few minutes for your glue to become a bit tackier, otherwise it does definitely run out from behind your twine and leaves your page a bit sticky, which you don't want. So I'll just do the same on the right hand side and then wait for that to dry. Stage, while your last little bit of glue is drying, you can start planning your journaling that you would like to do on the ticket. Okay, now we're waiting for our glue to dry before sticking down the twine. We can start deciding what we would like to put on our little journaling tags. Firstly, I always think that the date is very important. Even if you don't like to do too much journaling, I still think it's nice to at least put the date on it. Okay, the glue is nearly dry enough now so we can stick down the twine. Just remember to leave a little bit that you can tuck around the back. There we go, so I've stuck the first piece of twine down. Just remember to leave a little bit that you can tuck around the back so it just stops it fraying. Just doesn't give you a particularly nice look if it starts fraying on your page, unless that was your intention, but it always is best to knot it so it won't fray beyond that knot. But I generally just like to tuck it around the back. And then once I've tucked it around the back, I just attach it with my double-sided tape. We'll do that a little bit later. It is best to just make sure that it's totally dry first, the glue, so your twine doesn't move at all. Then it's up to you if you would like both of your pieces of twine to lie totally flat, but on a beach page I think it adds a little bit of extra interest if it actually knots over a little bit. But it's totally up to you. If you'd like to have it totally straight, you can. If you'd like to have it bending over a little bit, you can also go for that look, depending on what you would like to go for on your layout. Then whenever doing your journaling, just make sure that you've got a pen that is acid free as well. I've now done my journaling on the little ticket. I'll just wait for it to dry totally before turning it over to put double-sided tape on it. Okay, so now we need to just turn those over to the back. So what I do is I just flip my page over. You'll then just turn the twine towards the back and just put a little bit of double-sided tape to hold it. At this stage, you won't take off the backing tape because we don't need it to be adhesive. So we're not going to take the backing tape off at all. It's just to hold the twine along the back. So when we turn it over, you'll see it's just given us a neat edge with it going around the back. Okay, now we've attached all of the twine to the back of the cardstock. There's just a little bit of the glue that's sticking out from behind the button, which we obviously don't want. So you can just get a little bit of cardstock or just an offcut of any patterned paper just to remove the little bit of glue that's around the back of the button there. Just looks nice if those line up along the bottom. Even though this is a little bit higher than those, it's still quite nice if you just rather have them all lining up along the bottom. So now we've stuck down all of our photos, all of our elements, and at this stage you can just decide if there's any final features you would like to add onto your page. I think I might just add a few little Nouveau drops, and then the page is complete, and I'm really pleased with how it's come out. These Nouveau drops are really pretty. It's the Nouveau glitter drops. Generally, as I'm a boy mom, I don't usually get the opportunity to put too much bling and glitter onto my pages. So when I can, I do actually really enjoy putting some glitter onto my layout. This one is silver crystals, but it's a really pretty color. So it just gives you a little bit of shimmer onto your page. So I'm just going to add a few little drops, and then that will be my finishing touches on this layout. Just adds a little bit of dimension onto your page and a little bit of sparkle. And it's really up to you how many dots you would like to add to your layout. You can add as many or as little as you would like, depending on how you'd like to finish off your page. Then I usually leave my page flat for the next couple of hours so that it can dry properly. Generally, I would always wait until the next day to put your layout into an album, just so you can make sure that the drops are totally dry. You wouldn't want to risk them being a little bit wet when you're putting it into your plastic pockets. You can always just stand up and look at your page from above just to see if you feel like it needs any other embellishments or any other Nouveau drops on it. A little bit in the center of the flowers. Just be careful when you're working that your arm or your sleeve doesn't go into any of the dots that are already wet, because it will smudge them. But I'm really happy with my layout, and I think that's perfect. I don't really think it needs anything else at all now. It's just really interesting to see how my two layouts have come out. This is the first time ever that I've actually completed a layout which is identical to something else that I've done and just changed up a little bit. But I've actually really enjoyed creating this. So there's my first layout that I had, and it was the layout with these notes that I was copying, and then that's how my new one has come out. So it's really nice to see with the same set of notes how you can create a different layout that looks really so different. I don't think anybody would ever notice that this was exactly the same page. So I hope that you've enjoyed the video and you have noticed how easy it is to follow my layout notes. You just go step by step and you build your layout as you go along. Really couldn't be easier. You can now do more scrapbooking layouts in the time you have available. Okay, I've now completed my layout using my easy to follow layout notes. I'm really pleased with how it has come out, and you can see the difference from this layout to that layout. It's come together really quickly, but looks so different considering I've used different papers and different photos.